What if I told you we have just received information from the future? Data that provides objective measures that could potentially alter your main character story. A reminder that your present dictates your future. That yesterday mattered, tomorrow matters, and, of course, that you matter. You know what? In fact, let's say it all together. Yes, I can! That scene always jacks me up. Yo, yo, yo! What is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftinbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. And okay, I'll come clean here. We do not have any official data from the future, but we do have a glimpse into some rather useful information, validating why what you do today impacts how well you, the organism, the intelligent walking ape, not only operates here and now, but also very likely compounds in the cellular and metabolic longevity bank to impact your chances, likelihood, and probability of health and prosperity over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And if you've been around this side of the tube of Youb or watched last week's video, you already knew that. Now, what brings us here today is the new glimpse of information around early markers for one of the scariest diseases us modern intelligent walking apes face. And to be honest, a disease that we know very, very little about. We're talking neurodegeneration, often classified by two main umbrella terms, dementia and Alzheimer's. But in almost all cases, it includes the deterioration of our so precious mind. An age-related condition that is actually thought to start way before the first symptoms even show themselves. So today we are going to once again talk prevention, specifically highlighting some new data on how monitoring certain biomarkers as early as 40 years before disease onset can help mitigate one's overall risk for the condition. And if you ask me, seems like just enough time to implement meaningful change and keep that 5-pound mushy membrane sharp over the long run. So first we'll do a quick overview of this devastating condition, look at the new data, and then do what we do best and talk prevention, which doesn't happen to be anything extravagant, but is certainly powerful. Oh, and if you're watching this, just remember, right here, right now, is the perfect time to start or continue investing, because our 5-pound mushy membrane has shown to make mental gains at every age. And with that, let's work our mental muscle. Dementia and neurodegeneration. I know this topic hits home with a lot of people out there. There's a good chance you clicked on this video because you've had some prior experience with the condition. And the numbers don't lie. Currently, there are over 50 million people across the globe that are battling some form of dementia. And that means there's a high probability that their family is battling it with them. Alzheimer's disease, which is the leading form of neurodegeneration, affects nearly 6 million people in the United States. And that number is expected to triple by 2060. And here's the real troubling part in all this. To date, there are no proven effective disease-modifying therapies to prevent or slow this cognitive decline once it starts. That's right, despite millions and millions of dollars put toward dementia research each and every year, we know very little about its distinct disease drivers and have no present-day effective treatment for reversal. Yikes is right. This fact right here is the reason why I, a 31 rather healthy young individual, created and have been executing against a dementia prevention strategy for years now, which we cover in depth here. So you may be asking, what options do we, the species that is at the top of the animal kingdom because of their minds, have? Well, let's take a look at what we do now, because that's always kind of a good place to start, right? The data we have suggests that this is a disease that seems to accumulate over time, And when I say over time, we're talking 20, 30 years before the first symptoms actually show themselves. During this time, it is thought that neurotoxic waste, which is a byproduct of the wonderful gift of cognition, seems to accumulate in a combination of two ways: through unnormally high production and or inadequate clearance. Now, some of these issues have been linked to specific genetic variants, like ApoE4, which it could get tested for, but it's pretty rare, affecting less than 1% of the population. That being said, we must also consider there is a large amount of information that we just don't know. But research does suggest that both of these factors are, in fact, influenced by lifestyle. You don't say. I guess it isn't public knowledge that your everyday actions can influence how well you clean out the garbage from your noggin. We're gonna have to change that.
I'm the trash man!
So, how do we measure these quote-unquote lifestyle factors? Again, let's turn to what we know as of now. Recent studies suggest that potentially modifiable risk factors for neurodegeneration include obesity, diabetes, and high cholesterol. A lot of the usual suspects, huh? And if you recall from many of the other powwows we've had, these disease states are just an overarching classification of a whole lot of cellular and metabolic dysfunction happening under the covers. And guess what? The majority of this underlying dysfunction, which leads to these diseases, is thought to cultivate a biological environment promoting and accelerating the accumulation and prevalence of the two main proteins linked to neurodegeneration: amyloid beta and tau. The first being shown to form sticky plaques, killing off neuronal connections known as synapses, while the second develops into a long, tingly string-like chain wrapping around neurons and suffocating them synapse by synapse. Literal cellular warfare. But these are just a few of the suspected risk factors and mechanistic ways this mind-numbing disease propagates. Because again, it's important to remember, we still do not know a lot. And in times like this, we must channel Stoic philosophy and focus on what we can actually control. Thus, I want to remind you and me of the good news. Most of these risk factors are thought to be highly controllable, aka preventable, or at the very least, delayable. We also make up words here as well. Health, longevity, making up words. Good combo. And because, come on, all bets are off when you're on the dance floor, boogieing at 120 years old like I know you're aiming to. Bringing it back in. As we alluded to before, research has indicated that there are several risk factors that we know have a growing association with this disease, the majority of which are highly manageable, and leading scientists to conclude that the only present-day solution for this growing disease is prevention. Great, but any tips on what we should look for? It's just about time for that new research. The new study. Researchers out of Boston University did something really cool and unique, using data obtained from the Framingham Heart Study, a multi-generational cohort where participants were examined in approximately 4-year intervals for the majority of their adult life. They investigated the correlation between risk factors for cardiovascular disease and diabetes, including HDL and LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, glucose, blood pressure, smoking, and BMI, with incidence of Alzheimer's disease, if you recall, the most prevalent type of neurodegeneration. Now, this allowed them to do something rather interesting: evaluate the effects of vascular risk exposure on incidence of Alzheimer's based on a single point in time measurement from early, middle, and late adulthood, teasing out what markers matter in predicting the disease and when. Pretty crafty, huh? The cohort included 5,124 participants who were 5 to 70 years old at first health examination, which was all the way back in the early 70s. And let's pause to appreciate that not many studies have the scale and depth as this one. Kudos. Okay, unpause. Tell us the information from the future already. Come on. The researchers found from all the markers they tracked That lower HDL, often coined the good cholesterol, in early and middle adulthood was predictive of an increased risk of Alzheimer's later in life. Interesting. But what else? Next, that high triglycerides were significantly associated with increased prevalence of Alzheimer's, but only when developed in early adulthood. And finally, that high glucose in the blood, a marker for diabetes and a marker for insulin resistance, during middle adulthood is predictive of the disease. So I bet you're wondering, because I was wondering too, what does high actually mean? Well, they found that a 15 milligram per deciliter increase in HDL cholesterol early in life was associated with a 15% decrease in risk for Alzheimer's later in life, while the same increase in middle adulthood accounted for a 17% reduced risk. Hey, I'll take it. What about glucose? They found that a 15 milligram per deciliter increase in glucose measured in middle adulthood was associated with almost a 15% increase in risk for Alzheimer's. Imagine if you had both going on, like many people do. All in all, researchers concluded that their findings showed that HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and glucose measured in early to middle adulthood are significantly associated with incidence of Alzheimer's disease decades later, which suggests that early interventions to maintain healthy levels is probably a good idea. And in my eyes, this just adds to the case for prevention. Speaking of that, getting preventative. Now, in this analysis, researchers took a very focused look at cerebral vascular risk markers and their association with this condition. So it's important to call out that these are not the only markers you should look at and just be done with it. Good prevention, as you know, is a multifaceted strategy, which takes in several objective and subjective data points and continuously adapts as new information becomes available. That's just the way the healthy prevention cookie crumbles.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
If you couldn't tell, I modified the movie line just a tad. And guess what? There's no one size fits all. The perfect strategy looks a little different on each and every health owner, aka you. Now, for reference, when it comes to the handful of markers that we just took a look at, good ranges to strive for on your blood panels include over 60 milligrams per deciliter for HDL cholesterol, under 100 milligrams per deciliter for triglycerides, and fasting glucose under 90 milligrams per deciliter. But again, these certainly do not tell the full metabolic story. And as you already know, we talk about many other markers across all the other videos on this channel. For example, this video, where we take a deep dive into some of the hidden cardiovascular markers that you should be asking your doctor to test for, may be a good place to start. Although, I am working on a comprehensive living and breathing spreadsheet, which aggregates some of the most critical markers, ideal levels, while highlighting why they're important. All of this will be in our growing Patreon community, where we also host weekly longevity challenges. So if you want to join the longevity party, the links will be down below. And as for protecting our mind in general, I will repoint you to my comprehensive plan in the aforementioned dementia prevention video for the nitty-gritty details, all of which, might I add, revolve around improving cellular and metabolic health. But to give you a little taste, here is a high level of what we talk about. One of the most underestimated brain-boosting strategies that we have is prioritizing sleep. Why, you ask? Research has indicated that a single night of sleep deprivation can increase the prevalence of the aforementioned neurotoxic protein amyloid beta by upwards of 5% the next day. Say what? But guess what good sleep does? The exact opposite. It cleans the brain. One way is via the newly discovered detoxification system called the glymphatic system, a function of deep, slow-wave sleep where cerebral spinal fluid floods the neuronal streets and cleans out and washes away the waste. Pretty wild, right? This right here potentially makes good sleep the best neurodegenerative defense mechanism that we have, a topic that we cover in 20 plus videos on the How to Sleep playlist. The other top priorities to keep your mind firing on all cylinders include daily movement, as it's been shown to mitigate one of the biggest risk factors for neurodegeneration, unhealthy arteries, which play a role in both heart disease and cognitive impairment. It also upregulates a bunch of bioactive compounds, including one in the brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a potent growth factor that helps keep our neuronal connection strong and our brain young. 30 minutes, 5 days a week of moderate to intense exercise is all it takes, and it is a cornerstone of my personal strategy. Next, you know we can't go any further without talking about how what we consume plays a role. Because what you consistently put in is what you consistently get out. The highly processed Western diet is highly associated with pretty much all the modern day diseases which plague our society. And we talk about this in pretty much every single video on the How to Eat playlist. So more real food and less ultra-processed food is another good neuroprotector. This will reduce inflammation, regulate metabolic markers such as cholesterol, glucose, and triglycerides, nourish the ever so important microbiome, and help your energy factories, your mitochondria, work more efficiently, and thus make all of your other organs work more efficiently. For example, helping the liver be more efficient at breaking down toxins, one of them being amyloid beta, which we talk about here. Any real food-focused lifestyle can typically do the trick. One of the most studied and popular is the Mediterranean diet. So explore that playlist if you want some ideas. And I know you're not going to forget about the power of meal timing, because giving your body a break is critical too, especially at night. But you would know that because you've been through all the videos on the Fasting 101 playlist. Next, an often overlooked component to 5-pound mushy membrane health is keeping it active and challenged in a good way. Research indicates that exercising our brain mentally and socially is a strong preventative mechanism for cognitive decline. This is thought to be due, in part, to driving a higher level of cognitive reserves. In other words, more neuronal connections. By constantly exercising our noggin, by putting ourselves in social situations, and learning new and exciting things, we continuously build and strengthen our neuronal pathways. So challenge your noggin. And finally, with all of these things to start doing, sometimes stopping things can make even a bigger difference. In other words, stop the contamination. Smoking, indirectly consuming pesticides, fungicides, and insecticides, exposure to heavy metals, toxic consumer products, and air and water pollution do not help your mental cause. Because just as healthy habits compound, the opposite happens too. And unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of people in the modern world. These are just a few of the 5-pound mushy membrane protecting lifestyle habits that may be worth noodling on. However, I think I may have missed the most important one. The most important fact in all this may very well be our belief. The belief that we are all in more control than we think. The knowledge that prevention will always be an easier and more optimal path than reversal, especially in the case where reversal isn't an option. So take charge, become empowered as an owner of your health, and start laying the foundation for your future pretty cool meat suit and 5-pound mushy membrane today. Because there's simply no better day to start investing. And who knows when we'll get some data from the future again.